Hello, students. Good day. I am Dr. Twyla Williams, and I love research. In this session, we are going to talk about qualitative narrative design. So, welcome to our session today on that. And today we are going to explore how this particular design narrative can serve as a powerful tool for doctoral students engaged in qualitative research. And so, crafting narratives allows researchers to delve deeply into the meanings that people attach to their experiences, making the complexities of human life come alive through storytelling. Storytelling is a huge word when it comes to narrative. Let's just get started on talking about a little bit about the design. So, first of all, what is narrative design? Well, it focuses on stories individuals tell about their experiences, just what I said. But unlike other qualitative designs that might prioritize thematic analysis or case studies, narrative research is a bit different. It's rooted in understanding how people construct meaning through their storytelling. There's that word again. It seeks to tell or capture the essence of lived experiences, not phenomenologically. Okay, let's not get that confused. But it recognizes that the narratives shape our perceptions and understandings of the world. So there's some key features when we talk about qualitative narrative design that we can talk about, and I listed some here. First of all, we need to think about story and structure. And what it means is that at its core, narrative design is about the stories. That's what it's about. It can be structured around chronologies, themes, or even particular events that define a participant's experience. The story elements like plot, character, settings, all of those play a crucial role in conveying meaning. And so that's where that story piece comes from. Another feature of qualitative design is that it is participant centric. Participant centric. And this means that the approach it emphasizes the participant's voice. It's all about their voice. And as a researcher, your goal is to facilitate the telling of their story rather than impose your external interpretations. Okay, you let them tell that story and you don't impose your views upon their experiences. You'll act as a guide and you'll help them to unpack their experiences through these open ended interviews, which is the number one resource or data source used in narrative design. Another feature of narrative design would be contextual understanding. Okay. So we need to think about the setting, think about the context. Both of those are very vital roles, have vital roles in narrative design. Understanding how the participant, their social, their cultural, their historical context, how do those things shape their views? Okay, very, very important for us to keep that in mind in narrative research. It will provide a richness to the story and it will enhance the interpretation when we're mindful of those social, cultural, and historical contexts when going actually going through a narrative, using narrative design in our studies. Another feature of narrative design would be subjectivity and reflexivity. Okay, what does that mean? Well, narrative research, it acknowledges our subjectivity. As a matter of fact, both the participant and the researcher's perspectives influence the narrative. We have to be real. They both influence. So there's some subjectivity there. The difference here is that we do not look at it as taboo. We actually embrace it in narrative design. We're very transparent about the fact that that is there, and we let it become a part or critical tool in the process. Um, the reflexivity part is that, you need to be aware of your biases and your preconceptions. Again, making sure that you're very transparent and that you also make it known in your narrative that those particular biases may be present. Okay, we're very transparent about that in narrative. So when we talk about data collection, in narrative research because we try to cover, the actual description and features. Then we talk about collection and analysis for all designs. But if we're talking about collection in the narrative design, there's a couple of things that we can talk about. First and foremost, of course, that in-depth interview. By far the most common method for gathering data in a narrative design. Okay, these are in depth, Semi-structured interviews, they're usually longer than in some studies. These open-ended questions in the interviews, they need to encourage the participants to share their stories in their own words. Okay. Follow up, really good follow up and prompt questions need to be a part of the process. And that will help them to elaborate on significant moments that they're sharing with you about their life. Another part of data collection is that narrative inquiry. Okay, narrative inquiry for a narrative design makes sense. Okay, so you might think about engaging in narrative inquiry because this is where you ask participants to share their stories in a written form. Okay, and this could be histories, personal essays, diary entries, and all of these will provide some direct insight into their personal experiences. So that's a good type of collection, data collection for narrative design. Focus groups, well, they're a little less common, I'll be honest with you, because in narrative, we're not really so much looking at group dynamics. We're more looking at individual stories, but sometimes they can be useful, but not quite as often in narrative design. And then lastly, when we talk about collection, we can think about artifacts and documents, okay? Analyzing those personal artifacts such as letters, photos, social media posts, all of these can enrich your understanding of how the participants narrate their lives. Okay, all of it comes together. So these materials can often illuminate different aspects of the narrative that may not emerge, in the actual interviews. And so you need these actual artifacts and documents to help season that particular description of the experience. So it helps to do that. So we talked a little bit about some items that would be related to collection. Let's talk about some characteristics of narrative and what that analysis piece might look like. Okay. So we talked about the narrative analysis. Well, narrative analysis, of course, involves examining the structure and content of stories, understanding how narrative shapes the meaning, and focusing on plot development, the narrative coherence, and how the story actually unfolds, okay, over time. And so that's what that narrative analysis is. Of course, we can also talk about thematic analysis. We've talked about that several times before. While narrative analysis is essential, thematic analysis can also play a role in narrative design. And so, if we can identify those recurring themes within the stories and understand how those themes relate to the broader context of the research, then that's where that thematic analysis piece would come into play. Another thing about analysis for narrative design would be the chronological and the non-chronological analysis. Both can be true. First of all, we can analyze how the particular experiences or events rolling out in order, how does that contribute to the meaning? Okay. But then you can also explore some non-linear narratives that might not necessarily be in order, but they can reveal different layers of understanding for pivotal moments or non-linear experiences within their stories. And then lastly, the reflexive journaling piece. Throughout the analysis, you need to maintain a journal. You just do, especially with narrative. You need to maintain a journal. You need to document your thoughts, your biases, your prejudices, and any insights. As you engage in the narrative, you need to keep a diary of that to keep abreast of where you stand as a researcher. This process is going to deepen your understanding. When it also enhance your transparency, which needs to definitely be there when we're talking about biases and prejudices. You will be transparent and you will be more aware of where you stand when you're taking these stories and trying to make meaning of those stories. And as long as you're open about it in a narrative context, then that is perfectly fine. So lastly, let's talk about how we would present our findings in a narrative study. Storytelling. I'm going to say that word again. Storytelling, narrative, storytelling, narrative. And so we embrace the storytelling in our presentation. Um, We actually use participants' words, their quotes, their personal anecdotes, and we convey the richness of this that are in the narratives when we're going through the actual data analysis piece and talking about our findings. Those thematic connections are very important because while you tell these stories, you also need to connect back to the themes that you identified in your analysis. So that's very important. And that helps to create a comprehensive view. It balances the narrative depth with the scholarly rigor. And so you want to have that balance there. And then lastly, your implications. Well, not lastly, second to last, your implications. In concluding with your findings, you need to think about and reflect on implications of your study on the theory, implications on practice, and future research. What does that look like? Very, very important in narrative analysis. And what does this narrative tell us about the individual experiences, societal issues, and the broader context? So we want to bring it beyond our study, even, and how does it affect the broader context of the topic that we are actually talking about in our study. And then lastly, our ethical responsibility will always be there. We want to maintain that ethical responsibility. We want to ensure confidentiality and be very sensitive to presenting those narratives. Remember, these participants are sharing very personal stories with you. And so we have to be very careful, mindful, and remember that some of these stories are very vulnerable situations for them, and we need to handle those with care and make sure that we are presenting them correctly. So, in conclusion, the narrative design offers a unique lens through which doctoral students can explore the complexity of individual experiences, some complex things there that you can dig into. And by focusing on the art of storytelling, which we talked about in the beginning, you can uncover some profound insights. They can resonate with both academic and the real world context. And that's what you're supposed to do, add to the body of knowledge. As you navigate your research, remember that the importance of listening cannot be substituted. You have to listen. The content, the reflexivity, very, very important um, uh, items that you need to think about when you're doing a narrative, utilizing a narrative design in your particular dissertation. Remember to honor the voices of the participants. You can create a rich, rich tapestry of narratives that can contribute to our understanding, contribute to the human experiences. Narrative is a really, really interesting design. Thank you for joining me today, talking about this particular design. Embrace the power of the stories in your research journey if you choose narrative research. And I wish you the best in your endeavors. So, again, I am Dr. Twyla Williams. Again, until next week.